Someone clean this mess up. Oh, wait, that's you.
Someone clean this mess up. Oh wait, that's you. Laughter bursts through the ballroom. Maxwell Grant doesn't lower his voice. He wants everyone to hear. The old cleaner freezes, holding the silver tray, champagne dripping between her fingers. For a moment, her eyes meet his, steady, unbroken. The noise around them fades. Something in her gaze makes him look away. Just for a second. Guests whisper. Cameras flash. She bends down, wipes the spill, and walks off without a word. But her silence feels heavier than any insult. No one knows who she really is. Not yet. Before we begin this emotional story, tell us in the comments from which city you are watching, and don't forget to leave your like to keep following us. The music resumed, but something about the air had changed. The laughter felt thinner now, forced, echoing over the marble like it didn't belong there. Maxwell Grant raised his glass again, pretending nothing had happened. He loved control, the kind that silenced rooms and bent people into smiles. Tonight was his empire on display. The grand ballroom of the Larchmont Hotel, its crystal chandeliers dripping with light, the scent of champagne and power mixed like perfume in the air. He was surrounded by faces that adored him, or at least pretended to. Investors, models, politicians, everyone wanting a piece of his empire. He thrived on that hunger. But every few moments his eyes drifted toward the far end of the room, where the cleaner had disappeared behind a service door. Her eyes had unsettled him. Not because of defiance, no. It was something else, something unshakable that didn't fit the role she was supposed to play. "Max, are you okay?" laughed Oliver Denton, one of his board members, clapping him on the shoulder. "Don't let the help ruin your mood, buddy." Maxwell smirked, loosening his tie slightly. "Please, she's nothing. I've dealt with worse spills in my life." But as he spoke, he could still hear the faint scrape of the napkin against marble, the way her movements had been measured, precise, not clumsy like someone panicked. There had been control in her silence, dignity. And that, he realized, had been the real offense. The master of ceremonies called everyone's attention. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the visionary behind Grant Technologies, Mr. Maxwell Grant." Applause erupted. Maxwell smiled wide, stepping up to the golden-lit stage, the world exactly as it should be again. Cameras followed him as he took the mic, his reflection gleaming on the massive screen behind him. He began his speech, smooth, polished, the same one he had practiced 100 times. Words about innovation, about lifting humanity with technology, lies wrapped in velvet. From the corner of the room, a figure in uniform reappeared, pushing a cart of empty glasses. Maggie Lane. She moved quietly along the edge of the crowd, unnoticed now that the spotlight was back where it belonged. But someone was watching her, the man from the press booth. He squinted, leaning closer to the monitor that displayed the camera feeds. Something about her face stirred recognition, like a forgotten headline brushing the edge of his mind. Maxwell kept talking, confident, charming. "We are changing the future, one invention at a time. And tonight, we celebrate that progress." His words were met with cheers, but even as he smiled, the image of those grey eyes kept flashing in his head, uninvited. He forced a laugh, ignoring the unease building in his gut. Behind him, the technical crew whispered, adjusting cables. The journalist at the booth pointed at the screen. "Hold on, zoom in on that cleaner," he murmured to the cameraman. The operator frowned, uncertain. "Why?" "I think I know her," the journalist said slowly. "But that's impossible." The live feed shifted slightly, catching Maggie's reflection in a mirror near the champagne tower. Her expression was calm, almost distant. Then, as the camera light caught her face, she looked directly toward the lens, straight through it, as if she knew someone was watching. The man at the booth froze. Back on stage, Maxwell raised his glass, basking in applause. "To the people who make dreams real," he declared. The crowd echoed him, glasses lifted high. Champagne sparkled in the air like liquid gold. At that exact moment, Maggie disappeared through another door, vanishing into the service corridor. The journalist stood, whispering to his assistant, "Find out who she is, now." The music swelled again, but for the first time that night, Maxwell felt cold. The sound of applause still echoed down the marble hallway when Maxwell slipped off stage. Assistants swarmed around him, offering congratulations, taking his empty glass, whispering about interviews lined up with major outlets. But his mind wasn't there. He wanted another look at that woman. He told himself it was nothing, just irritation. But he knew better. He found a quiet corner near the catering corridor, pretending to check his phone while scanning the moving silhouettes of staff. No sign of her. Only waiters, guards, and the usual invisible army that kept his world spotless. He loosened his tie again, trying to shake off the unease. Back in the media booth, the journalist's assistant, a young tech named Leo, typed furiously on his laptop. "Sir, I think you might be right," he whispered. "I found something, but it doesn't make sense." The journalist frowned. "What do you mean?" Leo turned the screen toward him. It showed a pixelated photo, an archived article from 8 years ago. Dr. Margaret Lane, lead scientist of Horizon Nanotech's revolutionary energy project. The same grey eyes, the same face, just younger, brighter, unscarred by years of silence. "She disappeared after the scandal," Leo continued, voice low. "When Grant Technologies bought Horizon, everyone thought she'd taken a settlement and moved abroad." The journalist stared at the photo, then at the live feed of the ballroom. Except she didn't. Meanwhile, Maggie stood in the staff corridor, leaning against a service cart. The air smelled of detergent and faint perfume drifting from the ballroom vents. She took off her gloves slowly, folding them with precision, the same way she used to fold lab notes years ago. Her hands were older now, rough from cleaning, steady from endurance. She could hear Maxwell's voice faintly from the stage, his practiced tone slicing through memories that had never stopped haunting her. He'd stolen everything. Her team, her research, her name. And tonight, under these lights, he celebrated himself as the genius behind it all. She'd kept silent for years, not because she was weak, but because she'd been planning for the right moment. Tonight, that moment had arrived. A soft click echoed as she unlocked a small maintenance tablet hidden inside her cart. She wasn't here by accident. The Gala's screens were connected to the hotel's AV system, the same system her friend in tech security had quietly helped her access. All she had to do was wait for the perfect cue. Back in the ballroom, Maxwell returned to his guests, drink in hand, laughing again, trying to erase that flicker of discomfort. Cameras followed him wherever he went. "Mr. Grant, a photo for the Wall Street Journal," one of the reporters called. He obliged with a polished grin, every angle perfect, every movement rehearsed. But near the booth, the journalist whispered urgently to the event's producer, "You need to pause the slideshow. I think we've got a problem." The producer frowned. "What kind of problem?" "Just stop the loop, check the feed first," the journalist insisted. The producer turned toward the monitors and froze. The camera feed had shifted on its own, flickering once before revealing a still image. A younger Maggie standing beside a prototype device, her name and credentials displayed beneath. "Who authorized this?" he barked, rushing to the controls. But the system didn't respond. Every attempt to override failed. And on the ballroom's giant screen, Maxwell's smiling reflection was suddenly replaced by that same image, Margaret Lane, Ph.D., flashing alive before hundreds of guests. The crowd gasped, unsure if it was part of the show. Maxwell's grin faltered mid-sentence. The glass slipped slightly in his hand. The room fell quiet. For a moment, no one moved. The Gala lights shimmered across frozen faces as the screen above them pulsed with static. Then the image sharpened. Margaret Lane standing before a gleaming lab prototype, her smile calm, confident, the headline beneath reading, "The woman behind the future of clean energy." Maxwell blinked, confused. "What the hell?" he muttered, glancing toward the AV booth. "Turn that off." His voice cracked through the microphone, amplified through the speakers. Guests exchanged glances, unsure whether to laugh or stay silent. The music stopped. Only the hum of the projector filled the air. Maggie stood near the service entrance, watching from the shadows. She didn't move or speak, only watching his reflection glow across the marble floor. Her plan had been simple. Let the truth speak louder than revenge. At the booth, the producer fought with the controls. "It's not responding," he hissed. "I can't stop it." The journalist beside him whispered, almost reverently, Don't. Let it play. The image on the screen shifted again, transitioning into a news broadcast clip from years ago. A younger Maxwell appeared, standing beside Maggie in a lab coat, shaking her hand in front of flashing cameras. The reporter's voice narrated, "The promising collaboration between Horizon Nanotech and investor Maxwell Grant aims to revolutionize renewable energy." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some remembered the story. Others simply felt the weight of what they were seeing. Maxwell's smile from the video clashed violently with the rigid mask on his face now. "She looks familiar," whispered a woman in a sequined gown. "That's her," someone else muttered. "The cleaner." "What is this?" another asked, nervous laughter breaking the silence. Maxwell stepped off the stage, heading straight for the booth. "Cut it off now," he demanded, jaw tight. "Mr. Grant, it's looping automatically," the technician stammered. "Then unplug it." But before they could, the video jumped to another segment, one that had never been aired publicly. It showed a small press conference. Maggie was speaking passionately about ethics, about corporate integrity. Then another clip, her signature on a document. Then Maxwell's signature beside it. The headline across the bottom read, "Scandal at Horizon Nanotech. Project seized amid allegations of fraud." The audience went dead silent. Maxwell froze mid-step. His reflection stared back at him from the massive screen, trapped beside the truth he had buried. Maggie stepped out of the shadows, slowly, deliberately. Her steps echoed, soft but clear enough that even the guests at the far end turned. She wasn't hiding anymore. Her janitor's uniform, her gloves, her calm, it all seemed like costume now. Maxwell's voice broke through the stillness. "This is fake," he said loudly, forcing a laugh. "It's some joke." But his voice carried panic. The guests weren't laughing. They were recording. Dozens of phones rose like witnesses in the dim light. Maggie stopped near the foot of the stage. She looked up at him. No anger, no fear, only truth reflected in her eyes. Behind them, the video froze on the final frame. Dr. Margaret Lane, Chief Scientist, Horizon Nanotech. The words hung in the air like judgment. The silence in the ballroom was deafening. It wasn't the quiet of respect. It was the quiet that comes when truth rips through a lie. Maxwell stood at the center, his reflection flickering between the screen and the real man, one smiling, one unraveling. "Maggie," he finally said, the microphone still on, his voice echoing softly through the speakers. "Whatever this is, I don't know what you're trying to do." She didn't answer. She stood by the stage, her gaze steady, the faint shimmer of tears, not of weakness but of memory. The guests whispered her name from the video. "Dr. Margaret Lane," as though saying it might make the impossible make sense. At the booth, the journalist quietly filmed everything with his phone. "Keep rolling," he told Leo. "The story of the year is happening right now." Maxwell turned toward the crowd, forcing a laugh that came out hollow. "Folks, we seem to be experiencing a technical prank. Happens when you work with tech geniuses, right?" His smile didn't reach his eyes. Nobody laughed this time. The crowd had shifted. Admiration had turned to suspicion. Cameras pointed at him now, not for admiration, but documentation. A woman near the front whispered to her husband, "Didn't he claim that project was his idea?" "I think so," the man murmured back, frowning. "But her name, her title, it's all there." Maxwell's chest tightened. He scanned the room, searching for allies, but found only eyes, hundreds of them, reflecting his own fear back at him. He yanked the microphone cable from its socket, cutting the sound, and stormed toward the AV booth. "Who the hell gave you permission to show that?" he barked. No one did, sir. It started on its own," the technician stammered, stepping back. Behind him, the giant screen flickered again as if responding. New footage appeared, grainy, archival, time-stamped. It showed the day the patents were transferred, Maggie's signature, then Maxwell's, then a third, property of Grant Technologies. The reporter's voice from that old broadcast echoed faintly through the speakers. Sources claim the project's original team was dismissed without compensation. Gasps cut through the ballroom like sharp wind. Someone covered their mouth. Another muttered, "Oh my God." Maxwell's pulse hammered. He looked at Maggie again, her face illuminated by the cold light of truth. "You think you can humiliate me here? In my event?" His voice trembled, not from anger, but fear. Maggie finally spoke, her voice soft but resonant enough to carry. "I didn't have to do anything, Maxwell. I just pressed play." The crowd froze. Even the chandeliers seemed to dim. From somewhere in the back, a man called out, "Is this true?" Another guest shouted, "Tell us the truth, Grant." Maxwell tried to speak, but his throat felt dry, his words stumbling. "You people don't understand business. He stopped when he saw the look on their faces. The same people who once worshipped him now watched with quiet disgust. He turned to the security guards at the door. "Remove her," he ordered, voice sharp again. "Now." But none of them moved. The guards exchanged uncertain glances. One whispered, "Sir, maybe we should wait until the feed stops." The screen changed one final time, freezing on a headline that needed no commentary. "Whistleblower scientist disappears after corporate scandal." And standing before that headline, Maggie Lane, once invisible, looked suddenly immense. Maxwell stepped back, his face pale under the chandelier's glow. The empire he built on stolen brilliance was starting to crack, and everyone could see it. Maxwell's hands were trembling, though he kept them clenched behind his back. Years of charm, training, and control couldn't prepare him for this kind of exposure. He leaned toward the AV booth, whispering harshly, "Shut it down." "I don't care how. Pull the damn plug if you have to." The technician hesitated, glancing at the cables, at the dozens of live feeds now streaming the chaos on social media. "Sir, it's already out there," he whispered. "People are posting. Look." He turned his phone toward Maxwell. His own face was already trending. For Grant Gala, the real scientist, the stolen dreams. For a man who built his empire on image, it was like watching his reflection shatter. Back near the tables, guests murmured in disbelief. Champagne glasses stood untouched, the air heavy with judgment. Someone whispered, "He stole from her." Another replied, "They always do." The words crawled through the crowd like smoke. Maggie stood near the base of the stage, her uniform faintly illuminated by the screens. She could feel his panic, his desperation, the same kind she had once felt when her lab had been stripped from her, when her name was erased from every patent she'd written. Only now, she wasn't powerless. Maxwell turned back toward her, his voice low but trembling with anger. "You don't know what you've done." "I know exactly what I've done," she replied softly. "You've ruined yourself," he hissed. "Do you think this makes you look noble? You'll be sued, blacklisted." Her eyes didn't waver. "You already did that to me." The simplicity of her words cut deeper than any accusation. He looked around, searching for sympathy, but found none. His investors stood stiff, expressionless. His PR manager avoided eye contact. Then the screen flickered again, one final file loading. Maggie hadn't planned for this part. It was an automated sequence. The file name appeared in white letters, "Confidential, Internal Communication, Grant Technologies." The audience held its breath. The clip opened with a recorded board meeting, voices faint but clear. Maxwell's own voice filled the ballroom, crisp and undeniable. "Remove her from the contract. She doesn't need to be credited. The patents are under my name now. Tell her the settlement's non-negotiable. If she fights, we'll bury her in legal fees." A collective gasp filled the room. The sound of betrayal made real. Maxwell lunged toward the console. "Stop it! Stop it now!" he shouted. But the feed continued, indifferent to his command. His voice played again. "Nobody remembers the people behind the curtain anyway. They remember the man on stage." This time, the silence that followed wasn't just shock. It was disgust. Someone clapped, slow and deliberate. Then another and another, until the applause became a rhythm of condemnation. Maxwell froze. Every face that had once smiled for him now watched with cold recognition. His empire of charm had collapsed in less than 10 minutes. The screen went black. Only his ragged breathing filled the space. Then Maggie spoke, not loudly but clearly enough for every microphone still recording. "You built your fortune on my silence," she said. "But tonight, silence isn't mine anymore." The crowd erupted, not in cheers but in raw sound. Voices, cameras, questions, flashes. Maxwell turned his face away from the lights, but there was nowhere left to hide. Maxwell staggered backward, his face pale beneath the chandelier's golden light. The room seemed smaller now, every whisper echoing like thunder. He could feel his world collapsing in real time, an empire of prestige dissolving into humiliation. "Everyone, calm down," he shouted, raising his hands, but his voice cracked, trembling under the weight of disbelief. "You're watching something taken out of context. This is manipulation. She's lying." But the words fell flat, too defensive, too rehearsed. The crowd didn't buy it. The journalist in the corner kept his phone steady, recording every word, every breath. Maggie stood motionless, her posture composed, her expression neither triumphant nor vengeful. That calm terrified him more than her accusation ever could. "Do you deny the voice is yours?" she asked softly. Maxwell hesitated. Cameras zoomed in. His throat tightened as hundreds of eyes burned through him. "That audio was edited," he said finally. "It's fake, some deep-fake trick. You people know how AI works now." A woman near the front interrupted. "I worked for your company. I was in that meeting. It's real." The room gasped. Maxwell's head snapped toward her. One of his former project managers, face flushed but resolute. "You signed off on every patent that came from her research," she said. "You told us to erase her from the internal logs." Maggie's eyes softened. Not out of pity, out of quiet recognition. Truth had a strange way of multiplying once it was freed. Maxwell stepped toward the edge of the stage, pointing at Maggie. "You think this makes you a hero? You think people care who invented what? The world moves on. I made your work matter." His voice echoed like thunder, half plea, half madness. She tilted her head slightly, her voice calm. "You made my work profitable. That's not the same as making it matter." Her words landed like a quiet verdict. The audience didn't cheer, didn't boo, they just stared. The weight of his moral bankruptcy hung in the air. Maxwell turned to his PR manager, whispering hoarsely, "Call the press outside. We're shutting this down." But the man didn't move. Neither did the investors nor the guards. For the first time in his career, Maxwell realized nobody feared him anymore. Maggie stepped closer, her shoes clicking against the marble. "Do you know what irony is, Maxwell?" she asked. "It's spending millions to buy the future, only to realize you stole it from the one person who actually built it." He opened his mouth, but no words came out. The lights around the room dimmed slightly as the projectors powered down, the last image fading to black. The ballroom was silent except for the faint buzz of cameras streaming live. Maxwell dropped the microphone. The metallic clang echoed like a gunshot. "Get her out," he whispered to no one in particular. But no one moved. Maggie stepped past him, toward the stage stairs. For a moment she paused, close enough for him to see the faint glimmer of tears in her eyes. "You once told me the world remembers the man on stage," she said. "I think tonight they'll remember the woman who walked away." And with that, she descended the steps, the crowd parting silently to let her through. Maxwell stood alone under the spotlight that once glorified him, now exposing every lie he'd built. The applause began. Not loud, but steady, honest. It wasn't for him, it was for her. The doors of the ballroom swung open, and the noise rushed out into the marble corridor like a wave breaking free. Reporters and staff poured through, voices overlapping, flashes from cameras igniting the hallway. Maxwell Grant had been exposed, and the world was already hungry for blood. Maggie moved quietly through the chaos. She kept her head down, walking with the same calm she'd had when wiping the spill from the floor. Only now, every step felt lighter, like she was finally stepping out from under years of silence. "Miss Lane," a voice called behind her. "Dr. Lane." She paused. The journalist who had recognized her earlier jogged up, breathless, still clutching his phone. "Please, just one statement. The world needs to hear it from you." Maggie turned slightly, her face lit by the cold blue glow of the exit sign. "The world already heard everything it needs to," she said softly. "It just wasn't listening before." The journalist lowered his phone, speechless. There was something about the way she spoke, measured, unshaken, that made him realize this wasn't a moment of revenge for her. It was something deeper. Redemption, maybe, or release. Inside the ballroom, chaos ruled. Maxwell's PR team scrambled, trying to block cameras, but it was pointless. The story was everywhere now. Phones live streaming, reporters narrating, hashtags multiplying. Grant exposed, Maggie Lane returns. Maxwell stood in the center of it, sweating under the white-hot lights, surrounded by people who no longer saw him as a visionary, but as a thief. Every camera that once flattered now fed on his downfall. His empire wasn't collapsing quietly. It was imploding on every screen in America. Outside, the night air hit Maggie like a baptism, cool, quiet, real. She stepped onto the sidewalk, the distant hum of city traffic cutting through the chaos behind her. For the first time in years, she breathed without weight pressing on her chest. A car pulled up near the entrance, a sleek black sedan with tinted windows. The door opened and a young man stepped out, holding a small folder. He looked nervous, uncertain. "Dr. Lane?" She turned, surprised. "Yes. I was told to give you this," he said, handing her the envelope. "From someone who used to work for Horizon." She took it carefully, the paper still warm from his hand. "Thank you." When he drove off, she opened the envelope under the streetlight. Inside were a few documents, copies of old patents, emails, and one small note handwritten on the back of a faded company letterhead. "For years I stayed silent. You reminded me that silence feeds thieves. Thank you for speaking." Her eyes softened. She folded the paper and tucked it into her pocket. Across the street, flashes still exploded at the hotel doors. Maxwell Grant escorted out by security, his once perfect tuxedo disheveled, face ghostly. The press surrounded him like vultures, shouting questions he couldn't answer. "How long did you hide the truth, Mr. Grant? Did you really steal her research? Do you have anything to say to Dr. Lane?" He tried to speak, but no words came. The cameras caught every twitch, every blink. The silence that once made him powerful now stripped him bare. Maggie watched from a distance, not out of pity, but out of finality. He looked smaller than she remembered. She turned away, blending into the night crowd, her reflection disappearing in the glass doors of a cafe across the street. For the first time in nearly a decade, she felt unseen in the best possible way. But as she walked, her phone buzzed. A message, unknown number, just 2 words. "We're not done." She stopped under a flickering streetlight, her breath visible in the cool air. Whatever this was, the past wasn't finished with her yet. The message glowed on her screen. "We're not done." No name, no number. Just those 3 words that made her chest tighten again. Maggie stood motionless beneath the flickering streetlight, the sound of sirens faint in the distance as reporters still swarmed the hotel entrance. The air felt colder now. She slipped the phone into her pocket, her instincts sharpening. For years she had lived in the shadows, but the people who built empires from stolen work didn't let ghosts speak freely. Across the street, a police car pulled up to manage the chaos, and the blue lights reflected against the wet pavement. She began to walk, keeping to the edge of the sidewalk, scanning every passing face. In her mind, fragments of the old project returned like haunting echoes. The missing prototypes, the deleted data, the day her lab was shut down without warning. She remembered Maxwell's smirk when he told her, "You're brilliant, Maggie." But brilliance doesn't sell. Power does. Now his power was gone, but power never really vanished. It shifted. Someone else had taken the pieces he left behind. Her phone buzzed again. A new message appeared. He wasn't the only one. Maggie froze. She turned the screen's brightness down, heart pounding. Whoever it was knew how to reach her, and knew the truth wasn't complete. She ducked into a small diner on the corner, its neon sign buzzing faintly. The smell of coffee and fried onions grounded her. Inside, the TV above the counter played the breaking news. Billionaire Maxwell Grant exposed in live Gala scandal. The clip replayed her standing near the stage, silent, unflinching. The waitress poured her a coffee without asking. "Rough night?" she asked kindly. Maggie smiled faintly. "You could say that." The waitress nodded toward the TV. "Good for you. Someone had to do it." Then she left, leaving Maggie alone with her reflection in the window, half light, half shadow. Her phone vibrated again. This time it wasn't a message, but an incoming call, unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. "Dr. Lane?" a calm voice said. "You don't know me, but I worked with you once. Horizon Nanotech, 2013. Her grip tightened. "Who is this?" "I can't talk long," the voice said. There are files, internal communications. Maxwell wasn't acting alone. He was financed by a private investor who still owns part of your work. They're trying to bury everything again. Why tell me this now? Maggie asked, her voice low. Because you started something tonight, the caller replied, and they won't let it end with him. The line went dead. Maggie stared at the phone, her reflection shimmering on the black screen. She thought the battle had ended inside that ballroom, but it was only the prologue. The deeper theft, the real betrayal, had been hidden behind contracts and names she'd never seen. Outside, the city lights flickered as rain began to fall, each drop catching the neon glow. She finished her coffee, left cash on the counter and stood. Her uniform was still stained from the champagne, but her posture was steady, almost regal. She slipped on her coat, pulling the hood over her hair. If they wanted her silent again, they'd have to face something they couldn't erase this time: her determination. As she stepped out into the rain, her phone buzzed once more. A single photo appeared. Her younger self, standing beside the unfinished prototype, taken from inside her old lab. Caption beneath it, "We remember." She looked up at the night sky, the rain masking the tear that finally escaped. Whatever this was, she wasn't alone anymore. Rain poured harder as Maggie walked through the empty streets of downtown, her shoes splashing through shallow puddles that shimmered under the streetlights. The city had quieted after the storm of cameras and chaos, but her mind hadn't. Every step felt like it carried the weight of 2 decades, years of silence, humiliation, stolen recognition. But tonight had cracked open the lie, and now there was no going back. She found shelter beneath the awning of an old building, the place where Horizon Nanotech had once stood. The glass was boarded now, the company logo faded but still visible beneath layers of dust. She traced her fingers over the ghost of her name once printed on the entrance plaque, Dr. Margaret Lane, Chief Scientist. Her phone buzzed again. Another message. If you want the truth, go back to where it started. Below it, a location ping, an address near the industrial docks. Maggie hesitated. It could be a trap, or it could be the last piece of proof that would bury everyone who had taken part in what Maxwell began. She took a deep breath, then stepped off the curb, heading toward the docks. By the time she arrived, the rain had turned into mist. The old warehouse stood silent, its metal siding rusted, the word Horizon faintly visible under a new sign. Grant Technologies Research Division. Her stomach tightened. He'd never even changed the building name completely. She pushed open the door. The smell of oil and dust hit her immediately. Inside, the faint hum of old machinery still lingered. Her footsteps echoed as she walked deeper into the darkness. A light flickered on near the back. Someone stood there. A man in a grey coat, holding a briefcase. His face was unfamiliar, but his expression was calm, expectant. "Dr. Lane," he said, "you shouldn't have come alone." "I don't take orders anymore," she replied. He nodded slightly, almost respectfully. "Fair enough. I'm here to give you something before they erase it again." He opened the briefcase, revealing several old hard drives, each labeled with dates and initials. "These are the raw data logs. Your research, unedited. The proof that the patents were altered after you were forced out." Maggie stared at them, her pulse quickening. "Why help me?" "Because some of us couldn't sleep after what they did," the man said quietly. Maxwell was just the face. The people behind him. They're still operating under another name, and now, after tonight, they'll be desperate. Before she could reply, headlights swept across the warehouse walls. A black SUV stopped outside. The man snapped the briefcase shut. "They're here," he whispered. "Take it. Get out." He handed her the case, his hand trembling slightly. She grabbed it and ran toward the side exit as heavy footsteps echoed behind her. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving only the hiss of wet pavement. She ducked behind a row of shipping containers as 2 men in dark coats entered the warehouse. Their voices were low, sharp. "The drives, where are they?" She didn't wait to hear more. She slipped away through the narrow alleys, clutching the briefcase to her chest. The cold air burned in her lungs, but her steps were steady. By the time she reached the main road, dawn had begun to break, thin light spreading across the skyline. Maggie stopped, looking back once at the warehouse. For the first time, She didn't see a graveyard of her past. She saw a beginning. She whispered into the morning air, "You can steal a name, a title, a lifetime of work, but you can't steal what's coming next." The briefcase felt heavy in her hands, but it wasn't burden. It was power. The city was just waking when Maggie reached the small office of the Daily Ledger, the same outlet that had once published the first story about Horizon Nanotech. The sky was a watercolor of pale blue and orange, the streets still slick from the rain. She stood outside the glass door, soaked, shivering, clutching the briefcase like it contained her heartbeat. When she entered, the journalist from the Gala, Daniel, was already there, waiting. He looked startled when he saw her. "Doctor." "Lane," he said, standing quickly. "I wasn't sure you'd come." "I don't run anymore," she said simply, placing the briefcase on the table. "These are the original data logs. Every formula, every date, every signature they tried to erase. I want the truth published. No edits, no sensational headlines, just facts." Daniel opened the case, eyes widening as he scanned the files. This changes everything," he whispered. "It proves they tampered with the patents, forged signatures, buried testimonies." "That's what they built their fortune on," she interrupted quietly. "But people deserve to know where progress really came from." He nodded, emotion catching in his throat. "You'll finally get your recognition." Maggie smiled faintly, shaking her head. "Recognition isn't the point. The truth is." They sat in silence for a moment as the morning light crept across the floor. Then Daniel stood. "So we'll run the story today, I promise." When she stepped back outside, the city felt different, alive in a way it hadn't for years. The rain had stopped completely, and the first sunlight glimmered across the skyline. She walked slowly, her coat heavy but her heart light. Across town, news alerts began to flash on every screen. Whistleblower reveals massive corporate cover-up. New evidence emerges from former Horizon scientist. Her name appeared again, not as a footnote, but as the source. Inside his penthouse, Maxwell Grant watched in silence. His phone rang non-stop. Investors, lawyers, journalists, but he didn't answer. He just stared at the television, at the image of Maggie Lane speaking briefly outside the newsroom, her voice calm and unwavering. She said only one line before turning away. "Dignity doesn't make noise. It just endures long enough to be heard." The reporter asked if she forgave him, but she didn't reply. She simply walked away, the cameras struggling to follow her through the morning crowd. Later that day, a small email arrived in her inbox. No sender listed. Only one sentence. "Justice doesn't erase pain, but it remembers who survived it." Maggie smiled. She didn't know who sent it. Maybe someone from her old team. Maybe the man who risked everything to return her research. But it didn't matter. What mattered was that her silence had turned into something unstoppable. Truth with a voice. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the city skyline, Maggie stood at the edge of the pier. The briefcase was gone now, handed over, transformed into evidence. The waves lapped softly below, the air tinged with salt and light. She closed her eyes, letting the wind brush through her hair. For the first time in years, she felt peace. She whispered to herself, almost like a prayer, "It's over." And somewhere, in the distance, the world kept turning, louder, faster, but her heart was still. The woman once mocked for cleaning up after men now stood clean of every lie they'd built. The light of dawn reflected across the water, and Maggie Lane walked away, unafraid, leaving only the truth behind her. For years, Maggie Lane lived in the shadows of a name that wasn't hers. She scrubbed the floors of the empire she had helped build, while others toasted to her stolen brilliance. But the night she lifted her eyes beneath the chandeliers of that gala, everything changed. That single act of quiet defiance became louder than any speech Maxwell Grant had ever made. She didn't fight with anger. She fought with truth. And truth, when patient enough, always finds its voice. In the days that followed, the headlines shifted from glamour to consequence. Maxwell's empire fell apart piece by piece. Lawsuits, investigations, silence where applause used to be. But Maggie didn't stay to watch it happen. She had already moved forward, choosing dignity over revenge. Because true victory doesn't live in humiliation, it lives in freedom. She didn't need to see him punished to feel whole again. She simply needed the world to remember her name, the way it was meant to be remembered, not as a victim, but as a woman who refused to disappear. And somewhere in the hum of the city she once helped power, her legacy lived again, not in headlines, but in the quiet light of justice. Thank you for staying with us until the end of this heart-touching story. Tell us in the comments which part moved you the most. Subscribe and turn on the bell to receive more stories that inspire and transform. Leave a like if you believe in the invisible strength of dignity and family. And above all, thank you for being part of this community that believes in stories with soul. And before you go, watch the story I leave here on the left. I'm sure it will also move you and make you reflect.